Welcome to the Art of Living Free series with Anthony Szilard, brought to you by theartoflivingfree.org. Today we explore Experiencing Trauma, Part 2.
Okay, so for today's session, we're going to take a look at how many of us are experiencing trauma during this pandemic. This pandemic for many people is kind of a collective traumatization. Like, many people are feeling a sense of threat. And when we think about trauma is really like any life-threatening situation. So it could be crime, violence, rape, poverty, illness, natural disaster. Whenever we feel that our lives are threatened, we experience a sense of trauma. And this is where people start to have these incredible epiphanies. Like, yeah, I hug my children much tighter than I used to. Especially a lot of police that have worked with children that have been harmed or even killed. They don't see the world the same. And with detectives, other people working with victims of abuse and all kinds of stuff that I won't go into right now. It's just describing like, well, a renewed appreciation for life, renewed appreciation for relationships, and just a changing worldview. The other part of post-traumatic growth is realizing, like, hey, I can handle challenging situations. I can do something with this. Like, I'm more resilient than I was before. I think about myself. I work, as you know, I'm a leadership trainer, and I really work with people. I especially work with a lot of people who have in some way or another been disadvantaged in society, helping them to become sort of exercise the leadership within. I also do leadership trainings for Fortune 500 companies and so forth. But it's all around this theme about how do we grow as an individual and grow as a leader. And why do I do that? Well, I grew up with a physically abusive stepfather. When a man comes into your home, sleeps with your mother and beats you up, you don't feel like much of a person. That's how I grew up. And that, I was traumatized, of course. And what did I do with that? I was I let the pain and anger flip a lot between those, and I felt like a victim, and I took it out in a lot of negative ways, harming people around me, harming myself, getting involved in drugs and other stuff I shouldn't have been doing. But eventually, well, a number of things happened. One is that I learned the importance of forgiving. I don't know if you've ever heard that, the opposite of forgiveness is resentment, and resentment comes from the Latin words for which is again, and sentir, which is to feel. It's to feel anger again and again and again until we become paralyzed. So I learned to forgive even the stepfather who had been physically abusive, and that really sort of liberated me, freed me to move forward in my life. And what I realized is that, and this was actually, I went traveling alone to Patagonia in Argentina. I was doing a long hike by myself, and that's when I realized this importance of forgiveness and just letting that go. And a lot of people don't realize that. We forgive people primarily not for them, but for ourselves, just to not be caught up in that tightly wound, coiled relationship with them anymore, but just to be able to say, okay, they're a human being, they're imperfect, so am I. And just be able to kind of let go and let live. Well, what happened for me when I came to these kinds of realizations, it also helped me to crystallize that sense of powerlessness I felt growing up, where my home wasn't a safe place to be. And I'll also say this, that I started to feel gratitude, because I realized the person who I am today, I wouldn't be the person I am without what I had experienced. And I think about when I didn't feel it was safe in my own home, where did I go? I went to the home of one of the few African American families in my neighborhood. It was a man who actually wrote one of the first books about the African American experience in Vietnam. And that spending time with them and staying there often, because it felt like a safer place to be, also opened me up to other cultures, led to my doing a lot of work in the inner cities, led to my going into the Peace Corps in Kenya, marrying a Mexican woman. It really changed my life. And when I think about how did I change as a human being, everything I do today relates to that trauma or suffering I experienced as a kid. Because feeling powerless was a horrible feeling. I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. So that's why my work now is helping others to feel powerful, to access the power that's rightfully theirs. That's that sort of power of being able to see, okay, within the trauma, within the distress, there can be growth. There is growth often, whether we want to recognize it or not. Post-traumatic growth is really just when we are able to stop and acknowledge it or recognize it. So many of us are feeling traumatized right now. We're feeling there's a threat to our lives looming in the air, COVID, and we don't know what to do about it. And this can be very frustrating, can lead to feelings of powerlessness and helplessness, which I'll talk about at another time. But the important thing here is that many of us feel like no one's listening to us. So if we look at what's happened since, we think about technology and how technology has emerged in our lives and how it's grown and blossomed and flourished. We had 1995 was the Netscape IPO. That was the mass penetration of email and internet essentially into most households in the United States, and it's spreading around the world at the same time. So then we think about the early 2000s. We had Facebook, Twitter, social media sites. And then 2007 was the first smartphone with the release by Steve Jobs of the iPhone. So if we think about how our lives have changed with these new technologies, one of the unfortunate changes is that many of us have really dropped significantly in empathy. So whether we look at empathy as cognitive empathy, which is like perspective taking, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or affective empathy, which is empathic concern, feeling what others are feeling. When you look at general social survey data, there's questions that have been coming out every year since 1974. You see in the last 15 years, and this is based on Sarah Conrath's research, you see this decline in both cognitive and affective empathy, about 40% decline. And so many of us feel like no one is listening anymore. And so what do? We spend more time on our devices, on our phones, our tablets, our laptops, desktops, and less time connecting with others. Well, this is really unfortunate because never have we so needed each other as now when we're experiencing this trauma. For many of us on levels we've never experienced it before. So what to do? How can we manage this? And so in my next talk, what I'm going to do is talk with you about what I'm calling the socio-emotional antidote to the pandemic, which is compassionate companionship, which is being with someone during this process. Really, what Donald Winnicott, the psychologist, child and developmental psychologist, called holding, like becoming a container for others, really creating a safe space with another person where they can express the anxiety they're feeling, they can express some of the negative emotions they're feeling around what's happening in the world today, so we can help them to process those emotions and to essentially to reduce the trauma.
Life offers us many challenges, and the artoflivingfree.org offers new ways of thinking so we can see these challenges from a new angle and overcome them. Whether it's Anthony Szilard's free blog, video or podcast series, his book, Screened In: The Art of Living Free in the Digital Age, or personalized courses, the artoflivingfree.org will help you refine your life vision and then transform it into action. Find out more at theartoflivingfree.org.